Welcome to the Longest Day podcast. I'm Leah, your host and the founder of Broadstairs Consulting. We help rebuild relationships and facilitate effective dialogue. We are convinced that people matter and that conversations count, so we started The Longest Day, a series of conversations where we learn from the resilience, determination, and candor of our guests. As they look back on their longest days, our hope is that it will empower you to look forward. We hope their stories will be a part of shaping yours. Laurie Barkman is the business transition sherpa. She's the former CEO of an $100 million revenue company that was sold to a Fortune 50 company. As a mergers and acquisitions advisor, Laurie provides a structured process for business owners to plan successful transitions of their companies. She's the author of the Business Transition Handbook, How to Avoid Succession Pitfalls and Create Valuable Exit Options, guiding business owners on their journey from transition to transaction, from creating value to letting go. She's an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Carnegie Mellon University and hosts the award-winning podcast Succession Stories, where she speaks with hundreds of entrepreneurs who have shared their journeys through succession. Laurie earned her MBA from Carnegie Mellon University and Bachelor of Science degree from Cornell. She received certifications from the Alliance of Mergers and Acquisitions Advisors, the Exit Planning Institute, and the Value Builder System. Laurie, thank you for joining us on The Longest Day.
Leah, thank you. I'm so excited to be with you today. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Would you like to tell our listeners about your longest day?
My longest day was creeping around 10 years ago, and it was part of a bigger story, but I'll try to keep it brief. It was about being part of a third generation privately held company that was getting acquired by a global entity, a name that everybody would know. It was very exciting. It was very stressful. And that day that I'm thinking about was the closing day, when all the agreements were signed, all the hard work paid off over a 9-month period of time. I wasn't a family member, but I was one of the senior executives. I was a CEO running one of the subsidiaries. And this is a pretty big transaction, just to give you a sense of it. The total transaction for the shareholders was $1.4 billion. So it was a very significant event because of that, obviously the monetary side of it, but that it was a very significant event from the emotional side of it. And the longest day piece of it that I can kind of share from that emotional side, the family was third generation. The boss was the chair at the time. He was in his mid-60s. He did not want any fanfare. He literally just wanted to leave the building. We would not let that happen. The employees stood in, so we were in a kind of a headquarters environment with a big lobby, multi-level staircase, but it was an enclosed space, and we surprised him by standing in the lobby. He could not leave the building without us cheering, saying thank you, big cake, and just seeing him get a little choked up about that. This is a guy that didn't normally get choked up in front of people, pretty hard and fast business person. I have a lot of respect for him and for the business and for the family. And I just kept thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot believe this day is here. And I'm sure he was feeling that. His wife was by his side, his longtime executives, folks like me who were shorter tenure, but so loyal, just such a loyal feeling, and the clapping and the cheering. And I hope that when Elvis left the building, he felt celebrated.
That's such a positive longest day. And I love the emotion behind that. Was there any point in the run-up to closing that you thought it might not happen?
I think there probably were some points to a deal like that. It gets complicated. I think also, I can't go into too much detail about the transaction because it was a public company transaction. But I think there's always things in diligence that get discovered. And it's probably a watch out, right, for any entrepreneur listening to this that's thinking, oh, I might go through diligence one day. If there are things that you don't know about, chances are they will be discovered. So you just have to kind of be on the lookout for these things and then have a mitigation strategy. They can be environmental issues. They can be legal issues. They can be employee-related issues. And so these little tripwires that come up in diligence can be a sticky is this a saying, a sticky wicket, right? To address. And so can those sticky wickets be overcome in the negotiation? Sometimes it has to do with a price cut, or sometimes there's other, well, you've got a legal background. You've probably seen a number of these things where there's some maybe indemnifications that are put in place because of those things. So I would just say it's in that kind of category, and they just had to be resolved.
One of the things I enjoyed about your longest day is the focus on the loyalty of the people around you and that company ethos. What was your role in the company, and how did you choose to work there?
I was hired in from the outside as a CEO to run the subsidiary, and it was part of a long-term succession plan. So for me, it was very exciting. And it was amazing because, everybody's a first time something, at least, once in their life. And I was the first time CEO. So this was a huge opportunity for me. And I also loved that in the interview process, my boss had said at the time, we're not interviewing you for the next 2 years. We're interviewing you for the next 20. I was loving that because I had a number of experiences with startups, and 2 years is pretty normal in a startup tenure. But I love the idea of being here for the long haul and growing in responsibility over time. But I was coming in with a CEO title, which was great, or the intention for the CEO transition, which did happen after a couple months. And so I think that's really the main thing. I was running a piece of the business that had e-commerce, 2 e-commerce businesses, direct sales business. It was in the retail space. It was in what we called re-commerce. So inventory that doesn't go back to the shelf, where does it go? Our mission was to try to keep it out of the landfill. So we did everything from, overstocks, damaged goods, damaged boxes, to returned items, and then eventually even, as much as we could keep it out of the landfill, recycling, and work with recycling partners for all kinds of categories of products, and an amazing other side of retail that most people don't know about.
Many people would say that an exit disrupts a succession plan. How did you feel when you found out that the company was going to be acquired?
First, let's just take the word succession for a moment, because when I talk about succession, I like to break it into 2 camps, ownership succession and leadership succession. Your question inherently has both components to it, so it's kind of worth, I think, talking about both. So for me, I was not an owner, right? I had an opportunity to be an owner, and I was excited about that in the kind of the long-term incentive program that had been laid out as an executive. The succession on the leadership was, for me at the time, this is what's kind of crazy about my experience. In total, I was with the entity and the transition for 3 years, which meant a year and a half till the transaction and a year and a half after the transaction. This transaction cut my tenure short, which hurt, right? I didn't expect that. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. I have an opportunity. I had this huge title with the new entity. I was SVP of yada yada company. And that was a title that typically was reserved for people who had grown in leadership from within and had been with the business for about 40 years. And I recognized that I was a very unusual duck to have that title at such a short tenure. And I knew it was a target on my back. It just didn't kind of make sense for the business. And that's okay. I think that's the biggest thing here, is that I inherently knew that there was going to be an incongruency with the integration. And I might find myself on the other side. And I eventually did. And so that didn't feel great because I was so excited about it. I was all in. I was like, let's make this happen. I was all in for the acquisition and the integration. And so did that change my aspirations and expectations for succession? 100%. No question. No question. And there was a fair degree of movement in leadership because, unfortunately, the person that had been identified as the CEO on our side, experienced a health crisis. And that sort of set a couple of other changes in motion. And nobody wanted that to happen, and nobody saw that happening. And so it was a little bit tumultuous at the top on our side of the business for a little bit because of that a further unexpected transition on the leadership side. But look, that's life. We have to roll with it. So, yeah, I think it's a fair question. But again, for me, it was the leadership succession side that definitely changed.
What did you learn about yourself from your longest day?
I have an ability to adapt very well. I can work in environments where it's ambiguous. I can have a vision for what it could be like and see the positive in it. And then I just go all in. I want to support it. So I think for me, I was just all about it. Like, let's make this transaction happen. And then transaction's happening. Okay, great. Let's make the integration happen. And then when I left, I created my next. I created the opportunity. I got a little bit of money in my jeans, which was great and helpful. And I appreciate that so much from that opportunity. But also, it enabled me to do what I'm doing today, and kind of gave me the start and this vision of being someone who works with business owners to help them and guide them to create life-changing succession stories. And there's a whole lot to that.
It strikes me that not all leaders respond so well to change or uncertainty or the complexity that a transaction presents. Given that the leadership would be giving over the business to somebody else, how were the leaders around you responding to that reality?
There was a pretty sizable board, fiduciary board for the company, and then there was a separate family council. And the decision to sell and proceed at the highest level, of course, was agreed upon and supported by for sure the family, but then also these other fiduciary advisors. So at the very top level, there was that support, which is important. If there was any breakage in that support, I think it would have been challenging. So I think that we'll just acknowledge the governance side is really, really important. So that was there in place. And then from the executive team, at the time, we were about 12 people, which is a lot of ego, right? A lot of ego in the room. Some people had been through M&A transactions before, some had not, including myself. And again, for me, life stage, right, is always a factor. For me, in my young 40s, I was so excited. I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. I love where we are right now, but I can definitely envision this whole new career trajectory. Let's be part of it. For the most part, I can't say it was 100%, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty positive. And one indication of that was employment agreements. We, as a condition of sale, the buyer wanted to have all executive team members join the new entity, which is amazing, right? They could have said, well, we want you and not you, and that's fine. So we negotiated those terms and got those documents and signed them, and we were part of that Elvis day, right? We had signed our stuff. So we were part of that too. We weren't leaving the building like the owner was. But we were there, and we were going to help make this change successful. So once you sign on for that, you're kind of like, you got to be committed. Otherwise, you're going to have a dissonance in how you behave and feel. I think all of us exhibited that support and excitement for the deal because we all stayed on. There wasn't anybody. There were a few people who opted out, and I don't know, but they weren't at that highest kind of C-suite level, if I can say it that way. They were high level, but they were like, maybe one or two, it's either title-wise in the U.S., we have like the C-suite level and then senior VP level and then VP level. So we had some people at the VP and SVP who were like, hey, I'm good. They had some equity in the deal. They were so happy to quote unquote retire. Some of those people had been with the company for like 40 years. So from an age and life stage perspective, they were happy to go do their next thing. My next thing, I saw it as, yeah, I'm all in on whatever this new organization is going to be. But yeah, I think generally to ask, to go back to your question, I do think that the senior level people, the most senior level people who were involved in making the deal happen, getting it done, we're all in.
Well-being. You know the facts. Things are worse than ever. Burnout, trauma, absence, attrition. Leaders are tired of the empty gesturing about mental health. Leaders are resigned to ticking boxes, obliged to throw money away on medically flimsy, temporary solutions that have failed workforces. Adagio VR is the culmination of decades of work by a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Partners of the NHS and Oxford University, this is the world's first ever virtual reality program using clinical therapeutics accessible anywhere. Take meaningful action. Remove the need to cope. Adagio VR.
You mentioned that this was your first M&A deal. Is that right?
Right.
Baptism by fire, or everything went very smoothly?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, when you have a global company that's done numerous transactions at a global scale, they have a playbook, and it was really fascinating to see that in motion. Very competent people, very communicative. Once it's interesting in any size deal, I think now as a mergers and acquisitions advisor, working with companies in a much smaller market size, I think one thing holds true is that there's this moment in time when it feels like you're on the opposite sides of the table negotiating. And then there's this amazing moment when all of a sudden the vibe changes and you feel like you're on the same side. And I can't quite put my finger on it. I think it's got kind of a range of time as opposed to one moment in time. But it's an amazing thing to see that happen. And that's when the magic happens, right? That's when we start to talk about integration. That's when we start to talk about, the APA, the asset purchase agreement hasn't been signed yet, or the purchase agreement hasn't been signed yet. But we know we're working on it, and both sides have intention because we've agreed on the big pieces. And now we can start to think about the strategy a little more granularly for the integration. And that's amazing because, hey, everyone, if your business is, if you're looking to acquire a company, and you don't start thinking about integration until you've signed the document, then you're way too late.
So help me understand. You stayed post-closing for 18 months, and now you're the business transition sherpa. How did that happen? And tell me more.
A couple of other steps from here to there. I started to learn a bit more about the field of exit planning. My intention was to stay at the C-suite level. I do serve on boards, advisory boards for privately held companies, and one day maybe a fiduciary board member as well. But the idea of serving the owners in some capacity, staying at the C-suite level, and one of my toolkit Sherpa powers all throughout my career has been strategic planning. And what I ended up realizing is that there's some statistics out there that are disturbing. One of which is very few business owners across the globe, not even just the United States. I know it's true in the UK as well, that very few business owners have a plan for their future transition or exit or sale, whatever word you want to use. However, 100% of business owners are going to leave their business one day, right? So very few are prepared. And so that leaves us open to a lot of risk and potential issues that we're not exiting on our terms or our timeline. We're leaving it up to chance. Why would you leave your exit up to chance? And you can't do exit planning when you're exiting. It's just too late. This idea that I can use my superpower, which is the interest and desire to be strategic about a transition, was where this idea came from. I essentially combined two swim lanes into one. That yes, I have growth experience as an operator, right? How do we grow our business? But how do we do it with a lens of value? So getting certified as a mergers and acquisitions advisor, leveraging my experience for the benefit and value of the client to grow and add value to the enterprise before we have a potential acquirer at our doorstep. That's the idea. And so I got on this whole platform. I created a platform really to educate. And the very first thing was my podcast called Succession Stories, and an amazing opportunity to hear from entrepreneurs who have been through it and it went well, or they've been through it and it was terrible, and why. And either because of an owner death or a partner dissolution, or they had a successful exit, and what was transpired in all the years and blood, sweat, and tears. And just fascinated by all these stories. And eventually, I guess I thought, wait a minute, this could be a book. And I put it into a book. So it's called the Business Transition Handbook. And the Sherpa side of it really comes together in the book because it's my experiences in an anonymous way. I with client experiences, they're all anonymized. And I also include case study snippets from the show. So when people read the book, the feedback has been amazing because I'm saying, hey, here's the pain and here's the gain. What's the pain? Well, you want to avoid the pain. We want to avoid succession pitfalls. How do we do that? Okay. And then what's the gain? Well, we want to create valuable exit options. Well, how do we do that? And the book is this handbook, right? We want you to dog ear it. We want you to write in it. We want you to benefit from the learnings and be intentional. Have an action plan. That's goes back to my strategy. The whole framework, the Sherpa framework, is about having intention, having a plan, and then putting it in action and holding yourself accountable to it. And so this evolution now is that I've taken the book and I've made a course. It's called Endgame Entrepreneurship, and there's a bundle. The bundle is the course, which is an amazing resource, takes a whole lot more depth and breadth from inspired by the book. And then I've also bundled in a community and group advisory services. So as I say Sherpa, what I mean by that is, look, I'm with you on your journey. Our Sherpas are with you on your journey, and we're putting our time and energy where we say we can help you, which is you got to put in the time and energy, but we will support you along the way. And so that's what I'm so excited about is, can I eventually reach 1 million entrepreneurs to help them create lasting value that's creating a life-changing succession story for them and their family and a legacy that they're excited about. But it starts now, it starts yesterday. It doesn't start, right? The big message is don't wait till it's too late. That is by far the number one thing that I hear from people on my show is that when I say, hey, what would you do differently? They'd say, across the board, I wish I started sooner.
You're speaking to a very early stage entrepreneur. The lawyer in me thinks that when you're setting up a business, you're already thinking about how you're going to exit it and who might like to buy it. When do you traditionally engage with the entrepreneurs that you work with?
Well, Leah, can I respectfully challenge you on what you just said? I think that you are part of a very few people who feel that way or who think that way. There's a category, at least I've observed, the category that I would describe of people who think the way you do on, hey, I'm a new entrepreneur, I'm a newpreneur, right? I'm getting started, I'm a startup, and I'm going to build with my exit in mind. In my experience, that has been the venture-backed technology startup. And the reason why is because they know if they don't want to be bootstrapped and they want to raise money from venture capitalists, the VCs are going to ask them about their exit vision. So here I am busting a myth for the audience or encouraging everyone to realize that, look, why is that mindset only reserved for venture-backed startups? It shouldn't be. It should be for the everyday entrepreneur. It should be for the rest of us that don't have a SaaS platform or whatever, or AI, right? And it's the business, viewing the business as an asset is a step one to that. If we are an entrepreneur that sees our business as an asset and not just a job, then we're more likely to think about, well, what's my potential exit? So the course and the subtitle of the course is Build with the Exit in Mind. So I absolutely 100% love what you just said. The trouble is not everybody feels the way you do. So I find myself having this conversation when people say, oh, when's the best time? And my answer is still the same. Yesterday. For all the reasons, right? And here's the big secret. It's not such a secret. If a business owner works on all the things that I lay out in my book and my course, they're going to have a healthier, well-run business, and they most likely will have a healthier relationship with the business, more arm's length, more time to separate your identity and do other things and create a runway that eventually, maintains your and levels up your happiness, and as opposed to the opposite, right? And the statistics are out there. 75% of business owners express that they're not happy 1 year after the sale. And I have a whole webinar on that. Like, why? Well, there's lots of reasons why. And I think a big, big reason is identity. And I think another big reason is this future vision, right? If you don't have the future vision, then you're kind of going along, right? Just doing the good work. And that's okay. Look, I get it. Not everybody can have that future vision. But that's where opportunity lies, right? If we can understand what is this potential, and the other concept that I talk about a lot in the book and the course is reverse engineering your exit. And there's such an important strategy here. And the strategy is have the intention for your exit and own it. You don't know exactly what's behind door number 1, 2, or 3, but you can create options. And here's the other thing that I love to talk about with entrepreneurs. Many entrepreneurs are especially early stage, right? We want product market fit. Like that's the flywheel. We want to get to that. We really want to have product market fit. Awesome. Okay. Well, conceptually, if you think about your business fitting with an acquirer, same idea. What problem is your company solving for them? Because guess what? When you're not in the room, they're having a build versus buy discussion. Can we replicate what they do? And how much will it cost us? And how long will it take? Or do we buy them? So if your company is differentiated enough and it solves a particular pain point, the jobs to be done framework, if anyone's familiar with that, right? Or one of my other favorites is people don't want the 1/4 inch screw, they want the 1/4 inch hole, inches versus centimeters, sorry. But but the same idea, right? What's the tool, what's the feature versus the benefit? So many times we're stuck on the features, right? Like, well, my widget does this, this, and this. Oh, great. Okay. But what's the benefit, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the benefit of my book or the course is clarity, control, freedom, right? There's so many, and value, right? There's the extrinsic stuff too, right? The money and all of that. But so many intrinsics can come from that sense of control. Like, we can't control much in our business, but there are things we can absolutely control. And that's the message.
I imagine there was great celebration on your longest day. But if you had to live it again, what food would you choose to fuel it?
Probably a giant steak, like a tomahawk steak. Have you ever had a tomahawk steak?
I have not.
Okay, so imagine a very long bone, and I'm holding my hands up. It's probably 18 inches long. Again, I don't know what that is in centimeters. I'm sorry. And it's got the most delicious kind of filet mignon on one side and so on. And it serves like 3 people, right? It's just a massive piece of meat. And so if you order it in a restaurant, they usually serve it tableside and they cut it for you. And it's like a whole presentation. And it's like a whole thing. Like, you're ordering in the US, probably a $250 piece of meat, right? It's just a delicious, extravagant thing. So I probably would have had a celebration dinner where we went out and I got a tomahawk.
What would you have eaten with it, though? You can't have a steak on its own. Sides are king.
Well, you've got asparagus, you've got some sort of lovely potato, you've got maybe a nice little crab dip or shrimp dip or, some of these lovely appetizers. And of course, fresh baked bread, like, no doubt. And red wine. Yes, I'm a Malbec fan. I like Malbec.
You have excellent taste. Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you also for decoding entrepreneurialism and M&A and your experience managing transition. It's been so interesting to hear about your experiences, and it's been really great, actually, having you on the Longest Day podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. It was my pleasure to be with you, Leah.
You've been listening to a Broadstairs Consulting Limited podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Tune in soon to hear the next installment of The Longest Day. Copyright 2024, production copyright Broadstairs Consulting Limited, all rights reserved.